Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in.
Hello, my guest today is Celia Cheng of Cravings Media, a boutique design studio focused on the art of letterpress production, digital consulting, and lifestyle editor based out of Honolulu. Hi, Celia.
Hi, Jenn, and hi, Curito family.
Oh. So welcome back to Taipei.
Thank you.
And surviving your 14-day quarantine.
Yes.
It's still a thing. I'm excited to physically be chatting with you today. Before I begin, I do just want to also give a little background story to our audience. Celia and I first met in New York City back in the early 2000s. I think I was in college and you were working at Wall Street Journal, was it?
No, that was much later.
Oh, that's much later.
I don't even remember where.
Okay, that's not important, but that's where we met and have remained now family friends since our sisters and mothers all hang out on occasion. And I am a fan of Celia's work and creative energy and oftentimes look up to what she has created with Cravings Media. And when I invited Celia to be a guest on Curito Connects, she said she wanted to share magical moments as the theme for this conversation. I'm not entirely sure what that is in store for us today, but hey, who doesn't love some magic and what we learn from it? So Celia, please go ahead and take us on these magical moment journeys.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. And, I think actually you are taking us on a magical moment with Curito. I think in terms of your work, and I also love what you're doing right now as well. But I think, I think like attracts like. And so it's true that we met a long time ago and our families have gotten closer and we hang out and everything. And we've been through a lot of things together, fun times and hardships as well. But I think what resonates about our personalities and, kind of our mottos in our families is about the hope and the magical moments and the positivity that we see in the world. And so I'm quite a bit older than you actually, right?
I think we're like a generation, or in Chinese we say 1轮, right? A zodiac sign, 12
yes,
zodiac signs
exactly,
apart.
So I've been through some more things than you have, but I think at this very moment in my life, I am a designer who focuses on making letterpress work, particularly greeting cards right now. And
could you tell us a little bit more what letterpress is for those who don't know what letterpress is?
Sure. So I think letterpress is basically when you use a letterpress printing press, and these presses are generally pretty old. One of them that I have, they're from the late 1800s, and you make deep impressions on them. And people are most familiar with letterpress printing for wedding invitations, for example. I think some people think of it as embossing, but it's not. And actually, letterpress was not intended to create that kind of deep impression. That's what it has become. Letterpress was just a form of printing. And so you still can just print regularly and not have deep impression and make lots of posters and different things, paper matters like that. But in order to actually create the impressions that we have now, you're actually manipulating the machines a little bit to do things that they weren't exactly meant to do.
So they have evolved.
They have evolved,
yeah.
And of course we all love the deep impressions. And so it's a very magical quality, and that tactile feeling of the paper, especially when you have really high quality 100% cotton paper. It's just sorry, I'm like such a paper geek, and like it makes me so happy. It's funny, when I started studying design in graduate school, graphic design, at the time when I was studying it, because you always need a topic for design. So you always decide. And at the time, I was obsessed with food. And so when I graduated from school, I became a food editor and everything was about food. But I ended up getting into letterpress because I was getting married. And one day in the morning New York Times, the paper that, was a catalog for continuing education from Cooper Union. And for those who don't know, Cooper Union is one of the top design schools in New York City, and it's an excellent school. It used to be tuition free, so you really had to, get in based on the quality of your portfolio. And so Cooper Union was close to where I lived, and I looked at it. Everything was perfect about the course. It was a 10-week course, and I was like, oh, I could make all of my own invitations and everything, that you needed for the wedding. So I signed up for the class, and the first day when I showed up to that class, I forgot that it was a class, and so obviously there's a syllabus because the teacher has in mind all the things and the techniques and the different things that he wants to teach you about letterpress. And that didn't quite go with in my mind. Like, oh, I was like, I need save the dates. I need the announcement. I need the announcement for the website. I need, thank you cards for people who are coming. I need thank you cards for people who buy gifts. And I had planned everything out for 10 weeks. And I was like, oh, crap. And I was like, the first class is two color woodblock posters. And I was like, okay. So then I was like, that's fine. We're going to go with the flow. And I said, whatever the classes is and whatever I need to make is just going to work together. So my save the dates for the wedding was two color woodblock posters. And luckily, my list was very small. I didn't invite that many people, so I was actually able to make everything in the class. I mean, my teacher hated me because I spent a lot of extra time to finish this.
Was this teacher Milton?
No, so Milton Glazier was my mentor in graduate school, but this Daniel Morris, he taught me the letterpress, and Dan is actually also a seminal figure in the design community, and he is another person who is a mentor and who has changed my life, because I didn't know at the time that this would eventually ultimately become what I'm doing and the career that I actually love. Because for a long time I really thought my calling was food.
Oh.
And
to write about food.
To write about food, but of course, so when I graduated from graduate school, my thesis project was Cravings. And Cravings was a website, findyourcraving.com, and it was to introduce people to specific cravings and where to eat what in New York City that was good. And I launched the site for real when I defended my thesis, because I worked for an ad agency that made websites, and I managed and developed websites for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. So I just was like, oh yeah, of course it's gonna be a real website. You only had to do a prototype.
Right, but you went all the way.
I went all the way, and I remember my first feature, and for my thesis, I had featured 20 chocolatiers in New York City. And so that's when the interview started, and the love for everything. And there was a lot of different sections. I had features where very extensive research. And then we had Cravings, like just talking about what to eat where, like specifically what dish to eat. And of course, the landscape has changed so much. That was so long ago. I launched that in 2005.
You were way ahead of the game. We were just talking about this before we pressed record. How, the landscape has indeed changed. There was no Instagram then. You were very much in the forefront. I mean, I remember finding Cravings when I was in college, to know when I go to New York, where should I go eat, based on what you guys did, because it was, when I say we, because you and your sister were doing it together.
Yes.
And beautiful graphics, lovely design, obviously. But now you think about tons of people in that space.
Yeah. And, you know, it was so much fun. And in the beginning, when it was my thesis, when I defended the thesis, there were no photos. I mean, we only had photos for features, and everything else was based 100% on color combination. And I think for me, it was about like being able to bring out that sensibility and that feel of what you're feeling, what you're eating, that taste, the texture, and everything through color combinations. And I thought I was very successful, but you know, a lot of the critique during the defense was the teachers were like, "You need more. People want to see what you're eating." And so, and of course, like you said, as technology developed and as social media developed, you know, that became a really important element. And then eventually, when I was on Instagram, yeah, that my whole feed, it was kind of funny because my friends would be like, "You only take pictures of food. We never see you or people. It's just food." And so, yeah, no, it's changed, and that was very magical in itself. But
what was the hard part of that? Like, so you said when you defended it, they were like, "Well, you need to put more food photos in," and maybe for you, what like you said earlier, it was about the color combo for you because it was more of a visual experience of like how do you grab that essence of that experience.
yeah.
So it almost sounds like your professors did not quite understand the concept, but I guess you guys ran it for a while, right? And
Yes.
so at what point were you like, I'm done, like we're not gonna keep up with this?
We did it for 13 years. I mean, it was a really long time. And just to give people some context.
Yeah, like in terms of like profit, did you guys make money off of it, right? Because I think even in today's world of like, I want to be a blogger, I want to be, a KOL, a key opinion leader. How do you go around that concept of, well, I could create a living off of this, right? In terms of the creative element, producing, putting up all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's it was a challenge. And again, I wouldn't say it was at the very beginning of blogging, but and I will come back to this. But this is the timing of it is when we were still using the get guides, physical paper guides. Okay, so that's, I don't know, I'm sure most people don't even know what that is. And so for me, what was happening was that I had so many friends constantly contacting me and asking me, "Oh, I want to go, like, where should I go to eat? Like, I have this occasion, like, oh, I have this day," or like, what champagne should I get? And that's my sister's area, Miss Bond. She's the champagne specialist, and
we'll
she
give
was
her a shout out.
Yeah, shout out to my sister, and she was the wine editor of Cravings, and so I just decided to create a tool that wasn't paper-based, even though my passion was to create actually paper matter. But again, because my professional life mostly was in the digital world, it was good timing that I created Cravings as a tool. And again, in design, everything is about, I guess, solving problems like information. How do you resolve these issues? So it's information design. And so also it was like I wasn't one of the first bloggers. There were people before me, but it was when like tools, you're talking about technology. It was like Blogger was actually like the main blogging tool or whatnot. And I had the advantage that I worked with a lot of developers, so we actually custom created everything, and I could redo that a lot because I understood how to do it. But going back to, I guess, in terms of making money on it, and it's kind of the perennial question, whether it was 20 years ago or even now. And so that was hard because sure, you could do advertising, you could do, I think it's still all the same things, it's just so much more developed and savvy now. But
which makes it harder sometimes.
Yes, because you have to focus on so much. And when I was actually at the Wall Street Journal, that was our design department. had to cover print and digital, and you can't imagine, and that was probably like 5 years ago by now, but the amount of digital like formats that you have to cover alone, print is one thing, but then like digital, like it's not just websites, right? So like everything just keeps expanding, and so you need a larger and larger team. And so for us, an individual now to have to cover all this and to create content, to do the designs and to do interviews, to do podcasts.
I feel like you're talking to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, check. Those are all the things I'm doing now.
Yeah, and create your media kit, and then watch out for like what affiliate programs you join, and so on and so forth. Those are full-time jobs at companies. Like for individuals, like you have massive teams now who have to take care of all of this. And so again, I think with all of that, these were the different steps in terms of getting to a point where you can start your own business and really kind of have that experience and do what you really love, which is what I'm doing right now. And it just evolved. It was Letterpress, and I think when Cravings, when we were done with it, really, it was 2016, and two pivotal things happened in my life. One was that I got a divorce, and the other thing was that Trump was elected president. And
two very big things.
Yeah.
Was that hard for you and Miss Bond to say we're done here? Like how did you guys plan that out in terms like this is our last main feature, we're moving in our separate ways, you needed time to heal from everything that was going on that year, to then deciding because now you live in Honolulu, so that was also another big life transition to pick up and move across the country.
Yeah, because it was already 13 years into it, so the landscape had changed a lot. And I think, we were starting to already kind of focus on different things in our lives. And so I think even with the content, it was starting to feel like, oh, there's not really anything really new. And I think that's the one thing in life. I always look for constant learning and challenge. And so when it was getting kind of stayed, we did talk about it. And so I don't remember if there was a formal ending to it. But I think that happens a lot in that world where like a lot of content and blogs where you just really love, at some point it's just like whatever happens in people's lives, it's just
takes over.
Yeah. I do remember, I think, because Cravings for me was my baby. And so I think it probably took me mentally a long time to let go of it. But because there was so much other things going on personally, it almost made it easier because I just didn't have the attention to focus on that anymore. And so sometimes it's the being forced to let go of something is easier than like trying to say goodbye to it somehow.
Yeah, like giving it like a proper ritual of sorts.
Right. Yeah.
But you also, talking about hope and magical moments, now that we transition, it's like you sort of ended that chapter and you grew from it as well. But what you're doing now with the Letterpress and Cravings Media is a combination of everything you've done in those 2 decades. Right. And I think that's a very important storyline to remember, that, all the different things you experience don't go to waste because they all come back. They all loop back together.
Yeah, everything comes back full circle. A designer is different than just being an artist in terms of being a painter. Okay.
How so?
Or focusing on drawing and things like that. Because for me, a lot of it is like organizational design or things like that. And so when I was a management consultant. That's what I started out my career as. Okay, so it's funny because I was working for Ernst & Young in Tokyo, and this was, again, I'm so dating myself, but I was working on a project a Y2K project. And so we had to create these reports and everything. And obviously, there's a lot of due diligence and you have to do a lot of research. But my biggest concern for that project was choosing the right font. Now we designers would say typeface, and like the spacing of everything. And the client at the time was UBS, so it was a Swiss company, and I was like, oh, I love this font that they're using, their attention to these things. And so these things you start to pick up. And also I was making Christmas cards every year as a consultant. My like one creative project every year is designing and making these Christmas cards.
For EY. Like,
No, for myself.
Okay, for
and
yourself.
Sending them out. And then I remember one year, the last year I was there, I didn't make it. I didn't have time or something. And then I decided to quit because I was like, something's wrong. I was like, I'm getting too far away from this. And when I applied to colleges, I got into RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. I only applied to one art school, and the rest of them were liberal arts school colleges. And I got into RISD, but I chose not to go at the time because I thought it's easier if I go to liberal arts college and then decide I want to go back into art or design, but it would be harder vice versa. Like, what if I didn't this wasn't the route that I want to go? It's harder to get back to do those things.
You're very practical.
I was practical. I was using the wrong side of the brain. And then so I became a management consultant because this is what people did. And
yeah.
But then when I started doing the creative side of things, I was like, no, this is not good. And so I think those are the things
the trigger points.
The trigger points.
Magical moments. If you want to put it too, you can say it that way as well.
Yeah,
because aha moments.
The aha moments, because you really do have to trust your gut. And so when something, a lot of times I think we suppress what we're feeling inside because you start to question yourself or whatnot. So much of it actually is our learning and what society conditions us.
Yeah.
And again, whether you're this whole binary concept of everything. And even for me, I didn't know that until very recently, that everything is based on what you're conditioned to think. But if you actually for some reason can step out of that and realize it, then you're like, oh, nothing in the world is binary. You have the whole spectrum of every possibility, and it's not just gender or sexuality, blah blah, but it's everything. But for society to function, they have to try to package everything so neatly, and it's easier to control people that way. But anyways, I digress. So we were talking about, and then so I went back to New York, from Japan. I went back to New York, and I was still working in consulting for Deutsche Bank.
You still went back to that field.
Yeah, and then 9/11 happened, and it was also the end of the internet bubble, which is probably again before your time. And so, again, a lot of things happened, and I forget. Oh, right. 9/11 happened. I worked right across from the World Trade Center, and my entire team was downsized a week before that anyways, because the internet bubble burst. And so, again, magical moments, because I was lucky that had happened and I wasn't there when the towers fell. And so, but then I think that gave me some pause. We had some time, so I was volunteering at God's Love We Deliver. And then also, I think I started taking design classes. Just for fun at Parsons. So I was taking so many classes that I was like, oh, I probably should just go to grad school and get a degree because, and so when that happened, and again, once I did get my degree, and because, all my projects revolved around food, and then with Cravings and all of that. But in that interim, I guess, I was doing the food stuff, and then again, when I got married, because I took the letterpress class, all these things just, come back full circle because remember I quit my job, my first job, when I stopped making Christmas cards. And now I'm actually a card maker. And I'm like, really? Like, and I didn't even put that together for a long time. And I was like, oh, so I really do love cards. It's not just cards though. That cards for me are magical moments, and the themes of it are, right? And so it's that idea of sending someone something, and it's how you show love. It's how you show somebody that you care.
Yeah.
And so it's the whole process. I mean, obviously, I like printing the cards myself, which is a little bit over the top, but then it's the color of the pen that you choose to use with it. It is the envelopes that I match my cards with, and then it's the stamps. I love going to the post office and buying stamps and choosing stamps and, figuring out. So it's that whole package of what someone's going to feel like when they receive it. And you think of that from the perspective of if you're going to receive that, right? That's how I create. Like, this is what I would want to get. And so this is the feeling that I would like to feel. I love that feeling of super nice, thick paper that has a lot of impression, and so on and so forth.
I do have to ask though, letterpress and snail mail is a dying art.
Yes.
So, but I mean, I love what you're doing. I think it's really important. I'm just curious to know too, like, there's challenges to that as well, right? In terms of the marketplace, in terms of like, how often do you get snail mail that people send to you? Or in a year, how often do you send snail mail to people? Right? Because
I send a lot because I send my cards.
Right? Because it's usually, I mean, I also remember sending out cards for a long time, holiday season, and you send out cards and you're always asking people for addresses. I mean, kids these days don't even know how to write their addresses. So because it's easier to just do a little text or, put a little post or just send an email. So I'm just curious, from a producer, because you produce these, and also, like you said, that illustration of this exchange. I mean, in a way, it's an energy exchange.
Everything,
you know. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that I guess first of all, I never think that anything that I do is for the mass market. And so even Cravings, as in the food website, findyourcraving.com, was always meant for a very specific target. I have a very specific sensibility. I have a very specific, idea in terms of what I like and how I like to present things. And so I like it to be really, really targeted. I'm one of those people, like, I'm not trying to pander to you. If you don't get it, sorry. I'm not gonna try to convince you of anything. Like, honestly, you either love it or you hate it, and that's totally awesome.
It doesn't matter, yeah. Each to their own.
Am I able to swear? No.
Of course.
Oh, okay. So I really don't give a shit. And so, with the cards, it's actually interesting because actually it's true. Of course, snail mail is dying, but I think that's why it makes cards so special. And so when you do receive these things now, it's like a double bonus. And so this industry is actually in some ways having a comeback. Yeah. And the whole kind of letterpress too. There's actually more people in this industry now than there has in a long time, because people are into kind of, like slow life, slow food, slow everything, and reviving like these vintage crafts. And a lot of people, it's like me, like coming from the digital world, like my background is in that. I still make websites and keep up with technology, but I love working with my hands. And so it's a complete different thing where it's like the immediacy of it is not the priority, and it really is
that process,
the craft. And I can't begin to tell you, like, when I'm in my studio, like everything just disappears. Like, I'm so in my happy space. And I think before it was like, it's such a struggle because these machines are so old and there's so many different things that go wrong constantly. You're constantly tweaking it when you're doing production. But there's such a sense of fulfillment and a sense of, you want to figure out why. And your machine is kind of like, it's almost like a person.
It's your baby.
It's your baby, and it's like kind of like, it's like, oh, okay, but it
You're
can't
tired.
talk. And it's like, what's wrong now? Okay, there's a million different things I have to check. But then it's.
What's your machine's name?
I don't give my machine's name.
Oh.
But I do love that. Like, it's taken the time. It's taken several years to have rapports with them. And then, now it's like two of my machines are working so much better than it used to. Or with me, the machines are totally, it's like, it's like you said, it's an energy that you develop with these things too. So, and I have a new machine, and it's a larger, it's a Vandercook SP-15. And it's one of those big ones. And I bought it so that I could make my own Chinese New Year cards, because before I was going to New York to do that. And that one, I'm sorry to say I haven't worked with it much. And so it has been extremely challenging because it's not feeling the love from me yet. And once it does, I think it's going to be really great. But it's just, I think every time I get an idea for a card, that's a magical moment for me. And so, everything is about uplifting. I don't make, I think I get these requests and they're like, oh, why don't you make birthday cards? Like, you should make these cards or whatever. And none of my cards are specific to an event or holiday. I mean, except for the Chinese New Year ones, I guess. But it's like I make cards because they kind of strike me, and so it's these ideas or thinkings that I have. And so whether I frequently send out this card for birthdays, or and it's "you're fucking amazing," because you're gonna say happy birthday anyway in the card. I don't need to say that for you on the card. You can say whatever you want, but you're fucking amazing. I mean, what else is like? it's and people actually always love that. They love getting that one.
And you're excited that they love it.
Yeah.
Right? That's the exchange that makes you happy and feel very fulfilled, right?
Yes. And then I'd made a card where it's you bring out the iridescence in me. And I think again it's that feeling that you have about people. Like when somebody touches your heart, that's what you make me feel like. You bring out the iridescence in me. And then that allowed me to play with iridescent foil, and I love anything that's sparkly or glittery. And so, or I believe in miracles in you. And I think a lot of people or events or whatever trigger these ideas, and then I'm like, oh, I want to make a card out of it. And so, and then of course your state of mind, last year was all about fuck 2020. And then this year is zero fucks given.
Who knows what next year will be?
Yeah, but then
we'll be waiting for that one.
Yeah, and I think the other one that is actually right before the pandemic, I made an all Gucci card, and for me, I don't know. I know that the slang of Gucci means a lot of different things to different people, but
especially because that movie just came out.
Right. But all Gucci means all good, right? And so this card came out because one of my farmers at the farmer's market, he's just so chill, and he's, for the most part high all the time. And so whenever I see him, I was like, hey, how's it going, Paka? And he's like, all Gucci. And I was like, I need to make a card for you. And so I did.
That's the storyline.
Yeah, and I made it for him, but then the pandemic hit. And so nobody wanted,
no one's all Gucci.
Yeah, nobody's all Gucci. And then so this year, it was really because I think people had so much hope after fuck 2020. And so people really have been people like the all Gucci cards. And then of course the House of Gucci has come out, and it has nothing to do with that at all. But I like these concepts of all Gucci, that card has a hang loose,
Yeah.
a shaka at the back of it, and the concept of that really is this is all
Yeah.
Gucci, and people can't see it right now, but I'm making a hang loose sign on my fist.
Oh, fun. Well, we're running short on time, and I love this last few minutes where you explained the storylines behind these creations you made. Actually, I didn't know that either until you just said it just now, and it makes me go, okay, I got it. I'm gonna buy this card and that card and this card to send for these occasions and these reasons. So I'm gonna put all your links. On the bottom comments below so people can follow, and then thank you for giving Curito audience 10% off if they purchase.
Yay!
And before we wrap up, I do have 2 questions for you,
Okay.
so we can share with the audience. One is, during this entire time, because we kind of went through like a timeline journey here. Were there any individuals or or books you read or anything that really uplifted you during those different pivotal moments for you? That's one. And then my last question is, in regards to sharing with other designers or creatives who, resonate with your story and want to really be able to figure out how they too can, figure out, for instance, like card making or like paper and letterpress is really their thing. I mean, 2 decades basically was your time frame before now where you are with Cravings Media. What would you say to encourage them to continue to dig deeper, to really pay attention to the little things that really spark that magical moment for them where they're like, I really love this. I love that feeling. And I know oftentimes people say in these podcasts, I don't throw myself in there a lot, but there is a short, I would like to kind of tag team with what you said earlier about for myself too. It's like I did try a lot of different things, but I keep coming back to this, whenever I go to a venue, I'm like, this place is so amazing. We should throw an event here. We should have more people come here. Or when I meet people, I'm like, oh my God, that's really cool. You do this thing and you're so good at it. Let's do an event together. I think my head just kind of works that way and I get really excited about it. And I thought at some point that would go away because I was like, okay, I should go work like 9-to-5 job and make a steady income but I got so bored and I quit, right? I quit every single job I had because I just wasn't excited about it. But that feeling never went away, just like card making never went away for you. And that's where I am here with Curito, right? So I think for this episode, I feel like that's a very important messaging. So anyway, that's my little part I thought I would share in here. But anyway, so those are my 2 questions for you before we close off.
Well, let's start with the second question because I think you answered it yourself. And I love that you brought that up about your own, kind of journey and how it brought you to Curito. Because honestly, in the time that I've known you, I don't think it's just me. I think it's every person who knows you always told you that you should be doing that, you should be doing events, blah blah. But of course, I went through the same thing as you. Think a lot of times we're just like, oh no, we need stability, or I need to gain more skills and XYZ. Oh, I need to make sure how am I going to make a living? Will I make enough money doing my own thing? And of course, and this absolutely is true, but I think it's so hard. I don't know if it's to believe or to really, have the leap of faith to throw yourself out there and believe this. But if you do what you love, the money will follow. It will come. Because when you love what you're doing, it is not work. It's not work. And, of course there's work involved and you do have to do a lot, but everything that you do is rewarding. It feels fulfilling. You don't feel tired in the same way that at the end of a day of a job, you're like, oh my God, I don't have energy to do anything, because everything that you're doing just feeds right back into it, right? And you may go through some horrible learning experiences and you have to have those growing pains, but those things actually don't bring you down. And we were just talking about this before, where oh, well, I had this horrible experience, but I gained so much out of it because I learned all of these things. And actually, now I know better, and it actually brought me to this whole other level, and now I can do this other thing. And so it is absolutely mindset. And we talked about this too. So much of it is about mindset, right? Yeah. And so that ties back to the answer to question number one about, I think, inspirations or books. I thought about this recently. There are several people in my life who have changed my life, and they may not know it, but like exposure to these people made a huge difference. They actually are all turning points in my life. And I had a teacher in high school, and I wasn't a good student in his class, but this class that I took was an interdisciplinary class on modernism and then postmodernism, and it exposed me to art history and so many things. So again, it was the first time it was kind of like, oh my God, my mind was blown, right? And then one of my bosses, I worked for a company called WDDG, which stands for World Domination Design Group. And my boss, James Baker, I was thinking about this too. Like, he actually is another person who totally inspired me and, again, completely changed the course of my life. And in terms of having grace and, I remember one time I had said, like, oh, should I mention, like, that, the company when I talk about this? And he's like, no, that's not good form. And so, having some humility and not constantly having to advertise yourself. But, they were so good at what they do. And again, your craft is really important. And really focusing on that. But, I think I'll stop talking about people per se. In terms of books, there's so many books. But I do want to say that I think in the last, 3 years, one of the books that I literally can read every day, like I'll read a couple pages every day, and I can tell you I've read this book like a million times at this point, is Young Pueblo's Inward. And, he just came out with his second book, Clarity and Connections. And so Inward is, it's like poetry, right? And so these little nuggets of wisdom, again, his own learnings in life or whatnot, they're so succinct and so beautiful, like poetry, but they're reminders. And again, I can read, just 5 pages a day, or actually could read half the book or the whole book in one night. You could just read it over and over and over. It never gets old because they're just little reminders for you.
I have it on my bedstand as well.
And so I really, really like that. And, the other book that I do really... I've read so many books and they're all so great, like The Power of Now and Eckhart Tolle and all these things. But one of the other books that has really been so... that I just really, really loved was Tamed by Glennon Doyle. And I reread that again recently too. And it's not that old, but it's, even though it's not written for women, it's like we were saying, it's all inclusive. It just happens to be that it's relevant to everyone actually, but it is just... she's such a good writer. And again, like each page or every 2 pages is kind of a chapter, and they're so easy to read. And the journey of it, and self-discovery and whatnot, is just really important. And so I don't know if it was question 1 or 2, but have the courage to keep exploring and never, curiosity is so important. And so when you explore, like, take all the different classes and try different things, and never be afraid to just jump into something, and never be afraid to make a fool about yourself. And I think, again, so much of our conditioning, especially as I don't know, I think that just the way that we were raised in our education system, we are not as bold sometimes and to take risks. And so unless you do that and not care, because we care about what other people think.
Yep.
you're afraid of embarrassing yourself.
Yep.
And so I think I've learned this, and this is a very, very important message. Honestly, nobody gives a shit about what you're doing. Nobody gives a shit. Like, you think like, oh, people are looking at me, or like doing like, oh, I'm gonna make a fool. Nobody has time to worry about you because they're all worrying about their own lives and themselves. You cannot actually embarrass yourself. That's all in your head. And so, if you take those, if you can not care about that, and really I think that's the message of what zero fucks given means, like, just do your thing. And if you can, and be really honest and truthful, then you can follow your true passions, and then you kind of find that silver lining. But I don't mean to say, like, of course everyone has to go through their journey. You have to get there, and it takes time.
It takes time. Well, thank you. I'm going to put those 2 books down there as well, so people can find it on Amazon or wherever they get their source of books from. But thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is super fun.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah. We'll chat soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.